We cannot delay or postpone a constitutionally required November election.
President Trump has openly floated an idea that has never happened in this country's history. That is, delaying the presidential election.
The way he has treated the military.
I know more about ISIS than the generals do, believe me.
Dismiss the intelligence community.
The US has intelligence indicating that Russia paid bounties to Taliban fighters to kill American soldiers. But you don't believe the intelligence?
I think it's a hoax.
Absolutely undercut the FBI.
There were dirty cops.
I have no worry about him being escorted out of the White House.
Hello?
Привет, моя куколка.
Now we know that in the year since Donald Trump's White House first learned that Russia is paying bounties to Taliban fighters to kill American troops in Afghanistan, Donald Trump has spoken directly with Vladimir Putin 8 times. 8 times he could have stood up for our troops and demand that Russia stop. And when asked directly,
You had a phone call with Vladimir Putin on July 23rd. Did you bring up this issue?
No, that was a phone call to discuss other things.
And you've never discussed it with him?
Donald Trump admits his traitorous truth.
I have never discussed it with him.
Our troops deserve a whole lot better than a traitor like Trump.
Привет, моя куколка.
Why don't I have a high approval rating?
More than 150,000 people have died of the coronavirus in the U.S.
The U.S. leading the world in deaths.
Why don't I have a high approval rating?
Half of the U.S. population is without a job.
Why don't I have a high approval rating?
Allegations that Vladimir Putin put a price on the lives of American soldiers in Afghanistan.
You had a phone call with Vladimir Putin on July 23rd. Did you bring up this issue?
No, that was a phone call to discuss other things.
And you've never discussed it with him?
I have never discussed it with him. Why don't I have a high approval rating? Nobody likes me. It can only be my personality, that's all.
All of you will go to the polls and make a decision. I think when you make that decision, it might be well if you would ask yourself, are you better off than you were 4 years ago? Is there more or less unemployment in the country than there was 4 years ago? If you don't think that this course that we've been on for the last 4 years is what you would like to see us follow for the next 4,
World leaders were laughing at him.
then I could suggest another choice that you have.
Midas Touch is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Great independent leaders rise from Maine's hard soil. Always have and always will. Take Margaret Chase Smith. When the men in the Senate were terrified of Joseph McCarthy, she called him out. Just like Susan Collins stands up to Donald Trump. Oh, wait. Susan Collins never stands up to Donald Trump. That's why Maine is done with her weakness and excuses. Collins isn't an independent. She's a fraud. Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump control her voice. She makes excuses for corruption, for criminality, for cruelty, all while pretending she's worried, concerned, hoping Donald Trump learns a lesson this time. He never does, because she never stands up, never speaks out, never does what a Maine leader should do. Susan Collins doesn't work for Maine, she works for them. And Maine deserves a leader, not a Trump stooge. It's time for Susan Collins to go. The Lincoln Project is responsible for the content of this advertising.
staggering interview from national political reporter for Axios, Jonathan Swan. You just saw a little bit of it, who sat down with President Trump for Axios on HBO, where, for the very first time, a reporter presses him on the story that intelligence showed Russia was paying the Taliban bounties to kill U.S. soldiers in Afghanistan. There have been a lot of people who've tried to ask the president about this, but in a briefing or on his way to a helicopter, he always is able to blow them off. Here, the president is cornered, and Jonathan Swan does not stop. Here's the full exchange, and it is very revealing.
It's been widely reported that the US has intelligence indicating that Russia paid bounties or offered to pay bounties to Taliban fighters to kill American soldiers. You had a phone call with Vladimir Putin on July 23rd. Did you bring up this issue?
No, that was a phone call to discuss other things, and frankly, that's an issue that many people said was fake news.
Who said it was
a false? I think a lot of people. If you look at some of the wonderful folks from the Bush administration, some of them, not any friends of mine, were saying that it's a fake issue, but a lot of people said it's a fake issue.
There was
we had a call talking about nuclear proliferation, which is a very big subject, where they would like to do something, and so would I. We discussed numerous things. We did not discuss that, no.
And you've never discussed it with him?
I have never discussed it with him, no. I would. I'd have no problem with it.
But you don't believe
the intelligence.
It's because you don't believe the intelligence, that's why.
Everything, it's interesting. Nobody ever brings up China. They always bring Russia, Russia, Russia. If we can do something with Russia in terms of nuclear proliferation, which is a very big problem, bigger problem than global warming, a much bigger problem than global warming in terms of the real world, that would be a great thing. No, it never reached my desk. You know why? Because they didn't think it was intelligence. They didn't think it was real.
It was in your written brief, though.
They didn't think it was worthy of. I wouldn't mind. If it reached my desk, I would have done something about it. It never reached my desk because.
Do you read your written brief?
I do. I read a lot.
Really?
You know, I read a lot. They like to say I don't read. I read a lot.
I
comprehend extraordinarily well, probably better than anybody that you've interviewed in a long time. I read a lot. I spend a lot of time at meetings. Usually it's once a day or at least 2 or 3 times a week intelligence.
This was
talking about India, talking about with the problems with China, talking about so many different elements of the world. The world is a very angry place. If you look all over the world, we call up, I see 22 soldiers were killed in India with China fighting over the border. It's been raging for many, many decades, and they've been fighting and back and forth. I have so many briefings on so many different countries, but this one didn't reach my desk.
The reason I say this is even if you don't believe this particular piece of intelligence, and there is dispute, no doubt there is dispute in the intelligence community about it, your former, John Nicholson, former head of forces in Afghanistan, said, and this is when he was working for you, that Russia is supplying weapons to the Taliban. Isn't that enough to challenge Putin over the killings of US soldiers?
Well, we supplied weapons when they were fighting Russia too. You know, when they were fighting with the Taliban in Afghanistan.
It's a different era.
Well, it's a different. I'm just saying, yes.
But does that,
I'm just saying we did that too.
But how does that
I don't know. I didn't ask Nicholson about that. He was there for a long time. Didn't have great success because he was there before me, and then ultimately I made a change.
But you surely heard that, right? I mean, it's well known in the intelligence community that they're arming the Taliban, Russia.
I don't know. When you say arming, is the Taliban paying, or are they giving?
Russia is supplying weapons and money to the Taliban.
I have heard that, but it's never it's never reached my desk.
I mean, he said it on the record when he was in.
Hey, Russia doesn't want anything to do with Afghanistan. Let me just tell you about Russia. Russia used to be a thing called the Soviet Union. Because of Afghanistan, they went bankrupt. They became Russia, just so you do understand, okay? The last thing that Russia wants to do is get too much involved with Afghanistan. They tried that once. It didn't work out.
Eddie Glaude, he's always got this moral equivalency thing going. Your take on the interview?
Well, it was a stunning interview on a number of different levels. One is, to echo Heilman's point, is just clear cultivated ignorance. I mean, he just wallows in it. It's stunning, actually. But I think the other point is that what Jonathan Swan just laid out is that what was stunning for me was when Jonathan asked him the question about the Taliban and Russia supplying arms to the Taliban. And he moved to this equivalence, he made the equivalence move, Mika. The second thing he did was in some ways to attack General Nicholson. Right, so he quotes Nicholson, and then he says, well, Nicholson wasn't very successful, and then da-da-da-da-da. So his instincts really in this moment are not in some ways to protect U.S. interest. He will even turn on, a military figure as celebrated as Nicholson in some ways in order to justify his point. So it's cultivated ignorance, and then what he really and truly values in that moment. It's so stunning on so many different levels, Mika.
The extraordinary lack of intellectual curiosity, the lack of depth, the simplicity, the superficiality. This is a president, I mean, he's lecturing Jonathan on a piece of history about the Russians dealing with Afghanistan that is something that like any high school student knows. And the president sounds as though he's just discovered this. Hey, you know what? Russia used to be the Soviet Union, and they were involved in Afghanistan, and that's why they're now Russia. It made them bankrupt. You're like, are you kidding? This is the level of conversation we're having on this subject? I find the thing, Mika, to your point, I find the totality of the interview to be as revealing about how the president thinks about the world, this part of the world, and Vladimir Putin in general, as any on-camera interview we've seen. So again, I think it's a really valuable piece of video, and I'm really glad it's out there.
President clearly does not want to confront Vladimir Putin on something any other president would.
That's right, Willie. And when this story first broke, it was so explosive that the White House shielded the president from reporters for about 2 weeks. We had no opportunities to ask him any sort of questions whatsoever, despite efforts on the South Lawn, on Air Force One, even at news conferences where he would not take questions as he customarily would. So kudos to Jonathan Swan for this interview. It is indeed very revealing. And you hit it on the head here. This is a reflexive instinct for the president. First of all, to dismiss stories from a news outlet he doesn't like. The story about the bounties first broke in the New York Times, so he's able to deride it as fake news. His instinct is always to side with Vladimir Putin and dismiss U.S. intelligence. Most famously, of course, he did so in Helsinki when he would not condemn or even acknowledge Russia's efforts to interfere with the 2016 election. There have been other moments since where he has also, when it would be a negative viewpoint on Russia, he has dismissed the intelligence, even vetted it. And yes, there's to be some debate as to how reliable all of this intelligence was, but it was clearly important enough to be brought up in the highest levels of government. And what we're seeing here is, again, the president unwilling to confront Vladimir Putin on a number of occasions, on some of, including in this case, not just on U.S. intelligence, but on the lives of American soldiers.
Goes to, well, we did that too. We did that too back in the 80s. Instead of saying, yes, I'm troubled by that, and I also confronted President Putin about that. We've been saying it for how many years now, Claire? There's something about Vladimir Putin, there's something about Russia where the president will not confront this man.
Yeah, I wish we could get America's military all in one room and watch this interview, because this is a president who gives lip service to caring about our military. He wants to lie all the time about how it was depleted until he got to office. This is an explosive allegation that Putin is putting a bounty on the heads of American soldiers. It's explosive. It would be explosive to any president. It did reach his desk in a briefing, and he has done nothing. He's not said a word. And by the way, this allegation didn't come from the New York Times. This allegation didn't come from the media. This allegation came from people in the intelligence community, the vast majority of which are either active military or retired military. So it is coming from his people, from the people he gives lip service to, but always he takes the side of Putin. There is something really rotten with this, and I'm hoping that that everyone sees